Carline with 1010XL. Trent, do you like where you are at 24? Do you like the position where you feel like, the talent's going to be there? And Doug, same thing for you, please.
Well, I think you're always looking. You're always looking to improve the team any chance you can, and obviously right now is a big chance to do that with the draft a week away. But certainly feel good about where we're at, but never complacent in where we're at.
Yeah, I echo Trent's comments. We love obviously picking later in the first round and not first, like we did the last couple of years. But look, it's there's going to be some good players there, at 24, and we're excited about that. But again, we're in that position too where we're always looking to add talent, add depth, add competition, from a coaching perspective, and we're excited about that.
Demetrius Harvey with the Florida Times Union. Question for Trent. This draft, I guess, is one of the first where players have taken their COVID years. They might be 6-year players, so there's a lot more older players in this year's draft. How has that sort of changed your evaluation maybe of the prospects, or how has that impacted your draft?
I don't think it's had any impact, to be honest with you. I think you still look at the film, you go through all the information that you got, and regardless of whether they're 23 or 22, you stack the board at the level of value that you place on the player. So I don't know that it has any more of an impact. There's a few guys, this is a year where there's some older players in the draft, unlike some of the other years, but hasn't changed our approach at all.
Hi, Trent. Rick Ballou with 1010XL. This draft, but also in the future, how important is it to, address what you need to address as far as needs this year, but look ahead? For instance, Cam Robinson, a huge number next year with very little dead money, and then on the other side, Walker Little would be the final year of his contract. Therefore, where does tackle come into play, knowing that you may be set right now this year, but it could be very problematic in a year?
Well, again, I think you're always looking, as coaches, you look at today. As evaluators, you look at today and tomorrow. Pretty fortunate to work with a guy that sees the vision of not only today, but as the future unfolds. So we take all that into consideration, but we still set the board on value, where we value the players, and we let the board speak to us on draft day and have a plan regardless of which way the board falls.
Gene Fournette, Florida Times Union. Trent, and also Doug, if you want to weigh in as well. You've already used the word value and the board twice already in your first two answers, which is in keeping with what you've done in the past.
Yeah.
But when you're picking where you're picking, how do you balance the whole getting the value you want with meeting the need? And are there times where you might lean more toward a player because the position is of greater need as opposed to value? Because I'm assuming you have to balance those two all the time.
Yeah, you're always balancing need and value, when you say that, really each year the board's different, right? There's strengths and weaknesses in every draft. Some years the O-line, D-line are more prominent than maybe the edge guys, or vice versa, inside versus out. You're still you're still setting the board based on value, and then once you've got the board set on value, then you start looking at the needs. You don't want to push players up the board value-wise just because you have a need at that position. But I've been doing this a while now, and most of the time the value and need come together. Very few times have I looked at the board and said, whoa, there's just no value at the position of need that we have. Sometimes it might be a card off, but it's still close enough where you can address the need.
As a follow-up to that, when you look at where the depth is in this particular draft, it seems to match up with a lot of areas of need for you. So it would seem to me at 24, it would be almost virtually impossible for you to not have a player that you would really like there.
I hope you're right. I hope, it does. I mean, without getting into what our needs are, everybody has an idea of what they think our needs are. Coach and I have a firm belief in what our needs are, and we're not going to get into that right now, right especially before the draft. But we feel confident that there's going to be a good player at 24.
Doug, could you, if they're, whether it's 24, 56, wherever, if you get to that spot and Trent has a guy that he has in mind, but you kind of feel differently, how does it? Because you're not going to know what's going to be available until the time to pick.
I think, and this is what I appreciate about the way Trent and his staff and the way he handles the board, the way he handles it with us as coaches. If there's a discrepancy or there's something that we might differ on, we're gonna talk about that. We might even go to the tape, and watch some more film on a player, or bring in the position coach, talk to him, or bring in the scout that looked at this guy, and just exhaust everything we can and make sure that we're in agreement that when we pick a player that we're on the same page with that player. We're not always going to agree. That's just part of this process. But when we walk out of that draft room, Saturday night, those picks are ours. They're Jacksonville Jaguars, and that's the exciting thing that I appreciate from Trent, what he's allowed us as coaches to do in this process.
Hi, Trent. Hi, Doug. How's it going? Hope you had a good few months there of off time. For both of you, if you could each just kind of address how you would assess your pass rush and defensive line rooms at this current juncture as they currently stand.
Well, from the coaching side, obviously it's an area that we've got to improve. We do feel like we have the men in the locker room to get it done. Going into year 2 will make a big difference in the scheme of things, and so we're comfortable there, and obviously, as we build, our roster, getting closer to the regular season, we got to make sure that we have the right guys, at the end of the day. And so with that, I think being said, with Buck and Rory and even with Coach Shuey and working with the guys this spring, being able to put them in positions that we feel as a staff can help us generate more pass rush, And so, we look forward to that. It's a challenge for us, but we know that's an area that must be addressed.
And then just one more, if I could. I guess if either of you wants to address attendance during OTA so far, happy with it. Obviously, I think everyone's kind of familiar with what's happening with Evan right now, so I'm not sure if you're able to address that situation, but how you feel about how many guys are in the building right now.
I'm thrilled. We understand this is a voluntary program, and these guys don't have to be here. This is these are veteran guys, right? So they don't have to be here, and to have the attendance that we have, it's thrilling. It makes you excited to know that they're excited. Obviously coming off the season we had, and they're looking forward to what's ahead and what the possibilities are. So to see this number of guys here is encouraging, and we coach the ones that are here.
For Trent, just during the draft process, how important are these top 30 visits to obviously get to know these players better, but to maybe, I guess, do that little extra leg of homework on them?
Well, I think very important. Anytime you get a chance to sit down with a prospect, especially at that length of time, get a chance to meet with everybody in the building at different levels, for the coaches to sit down and talk ball with them, watch ball with them, for us as evaluators to ask the questions that we may have from all the information we've gathered. I think it's priceless. It gives you a chance to also get physicals on guys that weren't invited to the combine. So there's a lot of good things that come from it. And get to know the local guys that grew up in this area, that may be free agents or draft picks that really want to be back here. We had, I believe it was right around 30 guys in yesterday. Got a chance to talk to a lot of those guys, and the excitement of what's going on here, their familiarity with the organization, and just wanting to be a Jaguar. So that was encouraging.
And then, Doug, how important is it, obviously you guys talk about collaboration with the coaching staff and front office, but the input of your assistant coaches, because those are the guys that are going to be spending the most time with these players. How important are they during this process?
Yeah, and again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, and this is what I appreciate about how Trent handles this process with us. I mean, he involves us, and, he definitely wants everybody's input. And you're right. I mean, we're the ones coaching the players, and so he wants us to have that input and that say on guys. And I think it just holds us as coaches more accountable, right, to the guys in that locker room. Now we're all on the same page, and it's just a valuable part of the process. And the more eyes and the more information we can get on players, the better we can make selections.
Trent, when you look at this particular draft, the fact that there's so much talk about, quarterbacks could take the first 4 or 5 spots at the top. Does that, when you look at that, since that's not obviously a need, does it push guys down further? When you look at the top of this draft?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And, that's when you don't need a quarterback and there's 4 or 5 of them in the draft that people are coveting, at least 5 guys are going to go up in there, and it is going to push everybody back down. And you hope there's other positions where aren't real needs of yours that are heavy at the top end too, because that'll continue to push guys down. So, yeah, we need as many guys to go ahead of us as possible, and hopefully we'll have our pick of 2 or 3 guys that we have in mind right now. It's down to that level, probably two to three guys that we're really interested in, and we feel we've got a good shot at one of those guys.
Cole Pepper, Channel 4. I want to ask about scouting the player, or the person, not just the player. Doug, you've talked about this a lot, the makeup of the locker room. Trevor and Foye both talked about it yesterday as well. For both of you, what are you looking for specifically from a personality standpoint with the guy? And how do you learn about that when you only have so much time spent with these prospects?
Well, that's the challenging part, right? To gather as much information as you can. And I always say get the stars to align, get the dots to align. We do a lot of different things with these players, from interviews to psychological testing, profiling, all kinds of things in background checks, interviewing a lot of people that are around that player, going back to their high school years, just gathering as much as we can, and do all the stars align? Do all the boxes get checked? And when they don't, try to figure out what they're missing and why they're missing it, and if they really fit our culture. I think Coach and I have said this, that locker room's pretty special. We got a great group of guys in there. We want to keep it that way. That doesn't mean we're not going to take some risks at times, but we're always going to mitigate that as much as possible. So we've done a lot of work on these guys. Our board is not laden with guys. We got 127 names on the board right now that are draftable for us. So when you figure 230 plus guys are getting drafted, or 250, whatever that number is, you look at that, your odds, dwindle on having guys that are what you consider draftable as the draft unfolds. So the culture is huge. We spend a lot of time looking at these guys. Do they fit us? Do they not fit us? And there's a lot of guys that are taken off the board because they just don't fit our culture. They're good players, but they just don't fit what we're looking for. And the coaching staff has a big weigh in on that as well.
Yeah, for me as the head coach, I give a lot of responsibility back to the players, and this is where they handle the locker room, right? And I don't want to, micromanage the locker room whatsoever, but we have such a great group of guys down there, as Trent alluded to, that if there is a guy that whether we trade for a guy or draft a guy, or there's a free agent out there or something as we go, and maybe he's not a culture fit, but we still signed the guy, our locker room can handle that. We can absorb that. And I came from a place where we did that a couple of times, and the locker room just handled it. So, that we look for that. We put these guys, our scouts do an outstanding job of spending time with players and family members, and, as Trent said, coaches and anybody we can talk to get answers on players. And so we feel like the ones that are on the board are all great fits for us, again, but our locker room can absorb that, and they either buy in or they won't be here.
Guys, Josh Torres, WJCT. To both of you, do you feel like after last year, now that players are back, is there a different type of energy in the building? Do you feel like guys are coming back saying, hey, we know we got a good team here, we can take that next step?
This first week has been good that way, and I want them to believe that. I want them to feel that, coming off of last season. But we also understand that, we're just not going to be able to just walk out there and, repeat what we did. We still got to put in the hard work, the preparation, the time's got to be spent in the weight room, in the classroom, on the practice field. And I think that's what the guys understand. But yet I still want them to remember the ups and downs of last year, what we've been through. The energy's great. Last year, I think they were looking at me at this time going, who is this guy? How are we going to trust this guy? Trying to build that trust with the team. But they know who I am, how I operate. And the energy level is extremely high right now, and we got to continue that, obviously, through the rest of the offseason and on into camp.
Mike Duraco with ESPN. Trent, the Evan Engram situation, had you expected to have something done by now, and is the expectation you'll have something done with him before camp?
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. The goal is to get this thing done. These negotiations are always, there's ups and downs as you go through the process, and you're just trying to come to a common goal here is to get them signed. And, I think we're trending that direction, but we're not there yet. And we'll continue to work to get them signed to a long-term extension, and hopefully we can get that done.
Doug, after getting Calvin Ridley in November and finally him getting cleared, what was it like to finally see him actually on the field for you, and what does he look like to you?
I can't see him on the field right now. Coaches aren't allowed phase one. It's just exciting. He's fired up. He's excited to be here. We're excited to have him. He's he's been working with Trevor, obviously, and the guys spent some time together, and it's just another piece. It's another piece to our puzzle, and obviously a huge piece that can help us head in the right direction, the direction we want to go, and all of that. So we're just excited. We're excited. When we start phase 2 of the offseason program, we can be on the field with the guys and really see how everybody is really shaping up at that time.
Trent, Brent back here, CBS 47, Fox 30, and ESPN 690. You just mentioned 127 players on the board. Sorry, got a lot of checks. You just mentioned 127 players on the board. Does that make you potentially more aggressive in this draft to go get a guy that you want or see?
It can. It certainly can. Again, we have a specific way we set up the board. So while it sounds like 127, there's more numbers baked in there. Those are the 127 that we really feel fit the culture we want and fit the value that we have placed on them. And really, all the stars aligned. There's other fallbacks that we would go to, but really we're picking from 127.
And one more, if you don't mind, back to the tight end room. How much do you still need to build that tight end room, extension or not, for Evan?
We're going to look to build that room and get it as strong as we can. We don't feel that it's an absolute necessity to add to that room, but if there's an opportunity to add to it, we will.
Mark Long of the Associated Press in Gainesville, Jacksonville, with local, national, and worldwide reach. I beat his. Trent, you said you're down to 2 or 3 guys you really like at that position.
Or 4.
Well, you said 2 or 3 initially.
I'll hold you to it.
Is it daunting to try to get to 2 or 3 when you're picking 24? It's one thing to do that at 1. You got the first. But is it more daunting at 24?
Well, it's more daunting. I guess yes, short answer.
So how do you get to 2 or 3? Are you you're assuming that these other 20-something are going to be gone?
I'm just expecting that the board's going to fall a certain way, and through years of experience, you tend to get a feel for how the board is going to fall. That doesn't mean it's going to fall I've been sitting at 29 before and had nobody on the board that we felt was valued at that level. That happens. We feel good about this group, this class, that there's going to be enough depth in the draft, that there's going to be a player at a need position that we have valued, in that area that'll be there when we pick.
Trent, you talk a lot about the board and trusting the board and all this. I'm sure you've had situations many times where you have the player that you value the most at the time it's picked, but it might even be at a need position, but it might be a position where there's a lot of other ones available, and then you've got a guy you don't value quite as much, but there aren't as many people at his position. What do you do in that situation? Do you stick to the board and stick to the value, or do you have to sometimes veer off a little bit because there's not as many guys available at that position?
In fact, we talked about that this morning. We went through a scenario in more of a later round type scenario, but we talked about that. When there is depth at one position and no real depth at another position, and it is a position in need, you may push the need ahead of the value a little bit, but it's going to be within a respectable range. You're not going to reach way below the value.
Just wanted to circle back to what Brent asked about the tight end room, just to clarify. So right now, you guys, obviously the situation with Evan is fluid right now. Luke and then Garrett Prince, and then did you guys have any other tight ends right now on the roster? Okay. Doug, are you also tired of, this is actually a serious question too, but building off that, so many people I feel like always refer to your tight end room that you had in Philadelphia and your affinity for it. How have you felt like maybe either you've evolved or maybe circling back to that is a potential of going back, and maybe even just tired of hearing people say, oh, Doug Pederson and the tight ends, man, like that's a match made in heaven?
Well, I mean, I've always been, whether I was a player or a coach, we've always had really, really good tight ends. We've had great tight ends, going back to my days in Green Bay when I was a player with the guys we had. I mean, Keith Jackson, Mark Chmura, guys like that, and so the tight end as a quarterback, the tight end becomes a really important piece. I mean, it becomes almost like your best friend, right? It's at our level. I mean, that's a comfort for the quarterback, and so I've always tried to make our tight end room the best we can. Whether we do it through the draft, we do it through free agency, or trade or something of that nature, and so we still feel like even Evan, Luke, Garrett right now with the three we have. Obviously, we know we'll bring guys in for camp, and we'll compete there. That's a strong room. There's two young players there, but we've got a lot of high expectations for those players as well, and they know that. So it's something that we're always going to keep an eye on, as we go every year, and try to have the best tight end room, for our quarterback.
For either Trent or Doug, just with Cam Robinson, his recovery from his knee injury last year, is the expectation for him to be ready for the start of training camp?
From a health standpoint, yes. Yeah.
I actually have the same question about Ben Bartsch. We haven't really heard much about him in terms of where he is on his recovery or anything of that nature.
He's progressing well. I don't know that he's going to be ready for first day of camp, but he's ahead of schedule as of right now.
Okay, we have time for throw in Josh Wells.
He's healthy.
Oh, he's good.
Yeah, he's healthy.
Is there a best player in this draft?
Oh, loaded question. There's. Well, I don't get paid to address that. I think there's a best talent in this draft. Yes,
Do you?
I do.
Do you guys have an idea for comp picks in 2024, what you think you're going to get when you look at it?
I think right now we're on schedule to get a third for sure, possibly a sixth, fifth or a sixth for sure, and then the possibility of adding on a couple of sevenths depending on how some things play out. So we could end. Well, I think we'll have two for sure, with the ability to have up to four.
And with the Ridley compensation, is there a range where you would move back from 24 to try and secure something in the 2024 draft on top of the comp picks?
There's always a chance that we trade back. or trade up, to try to speculate and try to pick up more picks. I mean, as of right now, with Calvin's situation, we're down one. We picked up one, so we're at 7. We're at 9 to 10 right now in next year's draft is where we're at. So I don't feel a need to necessarily trade back to pick up picks, but if the opportunity's there and we still feel like we can get the same level of player, we would make that decision.
Is it hard when you're at 24 to have those talks with other teams in the days leading up to the draft because you just have no idea how the first 23 picks are going to go in terms of conversations of moving back?
Yeah.
Does that sort of happen on the fly, or?
I've rarely, if ever, had conversations pre-draft about trying to move. There's too much that can happen. There's too many scenarios to play out in your mind. I think as the board starts to unfold, you get a better feel for how it's trending, and then you start picking up the phone at the appropriate time. I just think it's too hard to play out. Coach and I thought, it's so hard to play all the scenarios in your mind, and you can sit in that room to nauseam and go through all the different, and then, the draft happens and 3 picks into it, your theories are, all your work shot, and you got to, swing from the hip anyway. So I think you're just better off setting the board, trusting the board, the values set, and then let it unfold.
I think we're going to wrap it up here with Rick.
Trent, most of the focus with fans and media is on the first round, but what is the most difficult part of the draft, and where would you put in thinking that you found a guy that perhaps other general managers are not aware of? I know that's hard because you scout them in certain places like the Combine and their pro days, but is that the toughest part of maybe believing that you have a guy that others aren't aware of?
Well, I think it's getting harder and harder to do that because the scouting itself and the information is so much more accessible than it used to be. The old days when you had nothing but newspapers to go by and everything, and now there's just getting the film and watching the film is so much. It's a click of a button, and you got everything at your exposed. So I think it's more difficult to find those gems, that nobody else knows about. But I think there's, I think the real art is in how you value the latter part of the draft and being able to find contributors at that level. If anyone thought a guy that was picked in the 7th round that goes on to be a starter and a Pro Bowl player, you found him, you really did. The bottom line is nobody in the league valued him at that, but that's why he was still available, right? So as Mr. Haley used to tell me, that's not great scouting, that's luck, right? You just happen to pick him. If you thought he was going to be that guy like Tom Brady, you would have picked him with the first pick in the draft. So I think you just put your board together and you really trust the culture fits that you're looking for, because that plays a big role in how they produce, especially those latter picks. What's their makeup? How hard are they willing to work? How competitive are they to overcome what they didn't have? Because if they had it, they would have been earlier picks.
Trent, Doug, thank you so much for your time. Media, thanks for finding us today. We appreciate it. We'll see you all very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.